You arrive here without fully knowing why. Something in you has already stepped ahead, crossed a thin line you did not see, and now waits in silence. There is no announcement, no instruction, only the sense that the ground beneath familiar thoughts has shifted, just enough to make you pause. You feel it as a tightening in the chest, or as a dull pressure behind the eyes, or as a restlessness that refuses to be named. You thought you were moving forward, yet something has called you inward. Not gently, not violently, simply with the certainty of a presence that does not ask for permission. You notice how quiet it becomes when you stop trying to explain yourself. In that quiet, an image flickers, a threshold, a door that was always there, disguised as ordinary life. You stand before it without resolve. There is no promise on the other side, only a feeling that turning away would cost more than stepping through. You sense a vastness that does not comfort you. It does not reassure. It does not flatter the ego with visions of improvement or transcendence. It waits, patient and impersonal, like a desert at dusk. You feel how much of your life has been lived outward, toward faces, events, demands, roles. How rarely you have remained with yourself when nothing answered back. How quickly you learned to fill silence with intention. Yet now intention falters. The old methods do not follow you here. What carried you before feels strangely useless, like tools made for another terrain. A dryness settles in, not emptiness, but exposure. The kind that strips away illusions without cruelty. You realize that whatever has called you does not want performance. It does not want achievement. It wants endurance. It wants you to stay when there is nothing to grasp. This is not the absence of meaning. It is the suspension of borrowed meaning. You notice resistance rising, subtle and sharp, a voice that mocks this stillness. That calls it pointless, indulgent, dangerous. You recognize that voice. It has protected you for a long time. It has kept you functional, admired, intact. And yet it trembles here, as if it knows it cannot rule this place. You breathe. The breath feels heavier than before, as though it must pass through layers you had forgotten. With each breath, something loosens. Not relief, but access. You begin to sense the depth beneath your thoughts, beneath even your emotions. A depth that does not speak in arguments or conclusions. It speaks in images, tensions, long silences. You are not descending yet. Not fully. This is the moment before movement, when the psyche gathers itself. You feel both the pull to remain at the surface and the gravity that draws you downward. Neither wins. They coexist, locked in a quiet conflict that does not seek resolution. You stand at the threshold, aware now that what waits ahead is not an answer, but a relationship. Not a solution, but a demand for presence. Whatever unfolds will unfold without haste. It is all the time you have avoided giving yourself. You step forward, and the air changes. The threshold does not close behind you, yet it recedes, as if distance is no longer measured by steps but by attention. What surrounds you now feels unfamiliar not because it is strange, but because it is intimate in a way you once avoided. The landscape has no clear horizon. Sand stretches outward, pale and burning, yet the heat seems to rise from within you rather than from above. This place does not welcome you, but it does not reject you either. It receives you with indifference, which is far more unsettling. You sense how exposed you are, without the noise of roles and reactions. Every movement of thought echoes too loudly here. Every intention reveals itself as a weight you carry, unnecessary and exhausting. As you move deeper, images begin to surface without order. A mirror half buried in the sand, reflecting nothing recognizable. A door standing alone, detached from walls or shelter. A river that appears only when you stop looking for it, then vanishes the moment you try to approach. These images do not explain themselves. They do not ask to be understood. They insist on being endured. You feel the presence of voices, not speaking clearly, not forming sentences, but pressing against your awareness like a crowd behind a thin wall. They carry contradictions, longing mixed with contempt, reverence tangled with mockery. You realize these are not strangers. They have always been with you, shaping choices, coloring perceptions, guiding you while pretending to be you. Confusion arises, sharp and immediate. You want orientation. You want to know where this leads. But the desert does not respond to questions. It responds only to patience, and patience feels like punishment here. Time stretches. Waiting becomes heavy. You notice how quickly discomfort tempts you to flee back into distraction, into movement for its own sake. The ground beneath you feels unstable, as though it could give way without warning. You sense that if you continue, something in you will be stripped bare. Not symbolically, literally in the inner sense. Beliefs you thought essential begin to feel ornamental. Habits that once provided safety now appear brittle, unable to survive this exposure. A thought crosses your mind, sudden and sharp. Perhaps this is madness. Perhaps you have gone too far inward. The idea frightens you, and the fear itself becomes another figure in the landscape. It does not chase you. It waits, watching to see whether you will collapse into it or move through it. You realize that control is useless here. Effort only thickens the air. The more you try to manage what arises, the more entangled you become. Something in you must learn a different posture, one that allows images to pass without grasping, without rejection. This feels like surrender, but not the kind that promises peace. It promises uncertainty. A memory surfaces uninvited. A moment when you avoided solitude by surrounding yourself with noise, with people, with ambition. You see how often you escaped yourself, mistaking movement for life. The desert reflects this without judgment. It shows you how much you relied on the outer world to avoid confronting the barrenness within. The sun hangs low, unmoving. Its light does not comfort. It illuminates everything equally, including what you would rather keep hidden. Shadows stretch long and distorted. You recognize pieces of yourself in them, traits you dismissed or denied. They do not accuse you. They simply stand there, waiting to be seen without commentary. You feel thirst now, not for water, but for meaning. The old meanings fail you here. They crumble when touched. You begin to understand that this place does not strip you to destroy you. It strips you to see what remains when nothing familiar answers back. Waiting deepens. The silence grows heavier, almost audible. You feel how the psyche resists this emptiness, how it tries to fill it with fantasies of future clarity or past certainty. Each fantasy dissolves quickly, leaving you more alone than before. And yet, within this aloneness, something steadies. You notice a subtle shift. The voices grow quieter, not because they have disappeared, but because you are no longer reacting to them. The desert remains vast, but it no longer feels hostile. It feels exact. It shows you that this descent is not a journey toward illumination, but toward honesty. You are no longer seeking answers. You are learning how to remain present when nothing resolves. The images continue to move around you, slow and deliberate. The mirror catches a glimpse of your face, then clouds over. The door remains closed. The river murmurs somewhere out of sight. You understand now that this is not a passage to be completed. It is a field to be inhabited. The descent does not promise emergence. It promises contact. And as you stand here, surrounded by silence, you feel the first fragile recognition that something within you has begun to listen back. The longer you remain, the more the desert rearranges itself around your inner weather. What once appeared barren begins to reveal subtle movement. The sand shifts in patterns too slow to notice at first, like thought before language. You sense that nothing here is static, not even emptiness. Even the stillness breathes. An image forms without warning. You see yourself walking, not forward, not backward, but inward, as if the path curves beneath the surface of awareness. Each step feels heavier than the last, yet more precise. You are no longer wandering. You are being drawn, not by desire, but by inevitability. The feeling is unsettling. It removes the comfort of choice. A mirror appears again, clearer now. You look into it expecting distortion, but what unsettles you is its accuracy. You see the face you present to the world, and behind it, faintly, other faces layered like translucent masks. None of them are false. None of them are whole. You realize how much effort you have spent defending one image against the others, mistaking consistency for truth. The mirror does not judge. It does not reveal secrets dramatically. It simply holds what is already there. You notice how quickly the ego wants to intervene, to select, to explain, to discard. You resist that impulse, not through discipline, but through fatigue. You are tired of choosing who you must be. The heat intensifies, not the heat of punishment, but of exposure. Old memories surface, not as narratives, but as sensations. A tightening in the stomach, a familiar shame behind the eyes, a quiet resentment you never allowed yourself to feel fully. These are not presented for analysis. They rise like smoke from buried embers. You feel the urge to escape into understanding, to name what is happening, to turn this experience into a story of growth. The urge itself becomes visible. You see it as another defense, another way of avoiding direct contact. Here, understanding is premature. Meaning has not yet earned its place. A forest edge appears at the horizon, dark and dense, impossible in this landscape. You move toward it without deciding to. The trees do not welcome you. Their branches twist inward, blocking light. You step beneath them, and the temperature drops. The desert fades behind you, replaced by shadow and damp earth. Inside the forest, sound changes. Your footsteps are muffled. The silence feels closer, more intimate. You sense presences here, not threatening, not benevolent. Simply alive. They do not speak, yet you feel watched. Not judged, witnessed. This awareness unsettles you more than hostility would. A river cuts through the forest, narrow and fast. Its surface reflects fragments of light, broken and restless. You kneel beside it, not to drink, but to look. In its movement you recognize your own inner flux. Thoughts, emotions, impulses, none of them stopping long enough to be grasped. You see how often you tried to dam this flow, how often you punished yourself for its unpredictability. The river offers no instruction. It does not ask you to surrender or to cross. It simply moves, indifferent to your struggle. Watching it, something loosens. You feel the strain of constant self-regulation begin to soften. Not disappear, but lose its tyranny. You realize how exhausting it has been to police your own depths. Fire flickers suddenly at the edge of your vision. A small flame, contained, deliberate. It does not spread. It does not consume. It burns with a quiet intensity that draws you closer. You sense its dual nature. It can destroy. It can illuminate. You recognize it as the same force that once fueled your ambition, now stripped of direction. You sit beside the fire and feel its warmth reach places long held rigid. The warmth does not comfort you. It awakens you. You become aware of grief you never allowed yourself to grieve, of anger you disguised as righteousness, of longing you buried under responsibility. None of it overwhelms you. It simply exists, finally acknowledged. Time dissolves here. You cannot tell how long you remain by the fire, watching the river, listening to the forest breathe. You sense that something is rearranging itself beneath conscious awareness. Old alignments loosening, new tensions forming, not resolution but reconfiguration. When you rise, the forest does not recede. It remains with you, even as you step back toward the open expanse. The desert awaits again, unchanged yet subtly altered. You understand now that these landscapes are not places you visit. They are states you carry. As you walk, the images begin to echo one another. Mirror, river, fire, forest. None stand alone. Each reflects an aspect of the same inner movement. You feel the emergence of a quiet insight, not yet articulate, but unmistakable. Something in you is learning how to stay present without domination, without collapse. The path continues, curving gently inward. You do not know what waits ahead. You only know that turning back would now feel like betrayal. And so you move on, carrying the heat, the shadow, and the slow awakening of a different kind of attention. As you move further, the rhythm of the inner terrain changes again. The desert no longer feels empty. It feels inhabited by echoes. Every step stirs something unseen, as if the ground itself remembers you. You sense that what rises now is older, less personal, shaped long before your own story began. A stone structure emerges ahead, half buried, half standing. A temple without walls. Its pillars are worn smooth, as if touched by countless hands over time. You step inside and notice there is no roof. The sky hangs directly above you, vast and indifferent. This place does not protect. It exposes. You feel a pressure here, subtle but undeniable. Not an external force, but an inner gravity pulling attention downward. Thoughts slow. Words thin out. Images take their place. You see fragments of lives that are not yours, yet feel intimately familiar. Gestures, fears, devotions, betrayals. You recognize them as patterns you have lived without naming. A voice rises, not as sound, but as presence. It does not tell you who you are. It asks nothing. It simply exists alongside you, vast and impersonal. You realize this is not guidance. It is the awareness that has always been there, waiting for you to stop filling the space with commentary. Your ego stirs uneasily. It searches for hierarchy, for meaning it can organize. It wants to place this presence above or below you, to name it, to claim it. Each attempt dissolves instantly. The presence cannot be owned. It cannot be worshipped or dismissed. It remains, unchanged by your reaction. You feel the tension of opposites tighten within you. Strength and incapacity, insight and confusion, devotion and resistance. They do not cancel each other out. They coexist, pressing against one another like tectonic plates. The pressure builds, not toward explosion but toward depth. A dreamlike image unfolds. You see yourself carrying a burden, heavy and undefined. As you struggle, you notice others carrying similar loads, each convinced their weight is unique. You want to set it down, but something in you refuses. The burden feels necessary, even sacred. You understand that this weight is not imposed from outside. It is chosen, again and again, through identification. The realization does not free you. It complicates you. You see how often you clung to suffering as proof of worth, how endurance became identity. The insight burns quietly like embers beneath ash. It does not accuse. It reveals. You step out of the temple, and the landscape shifts once more. Night settles in, sudden and complete. The sky darkens, stars emerging sharp and distant. The light they offer is cold, precise. You feel small beneath them, but not insignificant. Your problems lose their drama here, yet remain real. In the darkness, figures appear at the edge of perception, shadowed forms that mirror your movements. When you stop, they stop. When you turn, they turn. You recognize them as aspects of yourself you once rejected, traits you disowned to maintain coherence. They do not threaten you. They wait, patient and unyielding. You feel fear rise, then soften. These figures do not want to be eliminated. They want recognition, not acceptance in a moral sense, but acknowledgement of existence. You sense how much energy you spent pushing them away, how that resistance shaped your life more than their presence ever could. A fire burns again, larger now, casting long shadows. You approach and see that the shadows are not distortions. They are extensions. They reveal dimension, depth, form. Without them, the light would flatten everything into illusion. You feel a shift in perception, subtle but profound. Darkness is no longer the enemy. It is the condition that allows form to emerge. You sit with this understanding, not as a conclusion, but as a living tension. The desire to transcend fades. In its place arises a willingness to remain incomplete, to allow contradiction without forcing synthesis. This feels like failure to the part of you trained to conquer, to resolve. Yet something deeper relaxes. The night deepens. Silence grows thicker, almost tactile. You sense that this is not a pause between movements. It is the movement itself, the psyche turning inward upon itself, not to escape the world, but to realign its center. When you rise again, the stars seem closer, as if the distance between inner and outer has thinned. You carry no revelation you can articulate, only a quiet reorientation, a sense that the work is happening beyond your grasp, and that your task is not to direct it, but to stay present as it unfolds. You continue on, knowing that what awaits will not clarify this experience, only deepen it. And for the first time, that does not trouble you. The path narrows without warning. What once felt expansive now presses inward, as if the terrain itself has decided to test your capacity to remain. You feel the return of resistance, quieter but more insistent. Not fear exactly, weariness, the kind that questions why you continue when nothing promises relief. A river reappears, wider this time, its current slower yet heavier. The water is dark, reflecting little. You sense that crossing it would require more than movement. It would require relinquishment. You stand at its edge, aware of how often you have approached such thresholds in life, hoping clarity would meet you halfway. It never did. You kneel and touch the surface. The water is cold, grounding. It does not respond to expectation. It does not part or welcome. It simply receives your hand and moves on. Watching it, you feel the subtle ache of all you have tried to preserve. All you feared losing would unravel you. The ache deepens, then steadies. An image forms, quiet and unsettling. You see yourself laying something down, though you cannot name it. It feels essential. It feels like identity. The hesitation is immediate. Without this weight, who are you? The question echoes, unanswered, until it loses urgency. You realize how often that question has ruled you, how rarely you allowed it to dissolve. The river seems to respond, not by changing, but by revealing a shallow passage you had not noticed. You step in slowly. The current pulls at your legs, testing balance. You move carefully, not heroically. Each step demands attention. You feel the strain of effort without the drama of conquest. Halfway across, the water rises. Panic flares, brief and sharp. You feel the old impulse to fight, to dominate the current. It subsides when you stop resisting. You adjust your posture, soften your stance. The water still pushes, but you remain upright. You learn, without words, that endurance is not opposition. On the far bank, the landscape opens again, but differently. The desert is still there, yet something has shifted in how you see it. It no longer feels like punishment. It feels like a necessary bareness, a space where nothing distracts from what remains unresolved. You recognize how resolution was never the point. A faint light appears at the horizon. Not dawn, not illumination. More like a thinning of darkness. You walk toward it without expectation. The ground beneath you feels firm, dependable. You notice how your breath has changed, slower, deeper. Not controlled, but settled. Memories return, not as wounds, but as textures. Moments of failure, of cruelty, of missed connection. They pass through you without hooking. You feel them fully, then they move on. This surprises you. You had believed they defined you. Here, they simply exist as part of a larger field. A door stands ahead, familiar and unfamiliar at once. You do not reach for it. You do not test the handle. You understand now that doors are not always meant to be opened. Some exist to mark a boundary, to remind you that not everything is accessible through effort. You stand before it, feeling neither triumph nor despair. Only presence. The fire, the river, the forest, the temple. They converge within you, not as symbols to be decoded, but as lived tensions. You sense the quiet formation of an inner alignment, provisional and fragile, yet real. The path continues beyond the door, curving out of sight. You do not know where it leads. You no longer demand to know. Something in you has shifted from seeking answers to sustaining contact. The work feels heavier and lighter at once. You turn away from the door and walk on, carrying nothing you can name. The silence follows you, not as absence, but as companion. And within that silence, the dialogue continues, unfinished, alive, asking only that you remain. You feel it before you understand it, a subtle tightening in the inner field, like breath held just a moment longer than comfort allows. Nothing dramatic announces itself. No vision descends. No voice clarifies what is happening. Yet something gathers, quietly, inevitably, as if all the earlier movements have been leaning toward this point without naming it. The desert grows still in a way that feels deliberate. Even the wind seems to pause. You sense the accumulation of everything you have carried so far, not as memories or insights, but as weight distributed differently within you. The burden you once dragged now rests closer to the center, no longer pulling you forward or back. An image rises slowly. A furnace, ancient and circular, built of dark stone. It does not blaze. It glows from within, steady and contained. You recognize this heat. It is not passion, not ambition. It is the quiet intensity of sustained attention, the kind that does not seek release. You step closer and feel the warmth penetrate without burning. It reaches places untouched by effort or will. You sense old identifications loosening, not violently, but through prolonged exposure. Like metal softened by heat, no longer rigid, no longer brittle. You realize this is not transformation as renewal. It is transformation as endurance. Thoughts attempt to intrude. They frame what is happening as progress, as achievement, as arrival. You watch them arise and dissolve without engagement. They feel thin here, inadequate. Language cannot contain this pressure. Any attempt to conclude feels premature, almost disrespectful to the process unfolding. The furnace does not demand sacrifice. It does not ask you to throw anything in, and yet you feel things falling away. Assumptions about who you are, narratives about where you are going. Even the identity of the seeker begins to thin. This unsettles you more than pain ever did. For a moment, panic surfaces, a sharp sense of groundlessness. If you are not striving, not improving, not becoming, then what remains? The question hangs in the air, unanswered. Then it loosens, like a knot untied without force. You see that the question itself belonged to an earlier orientation. A mirror stands nearby, not reflecting your face, but the furnace behind you. You see yourself only indirectly, as part of the field that surrounds the fire. Subject and object blur. You are both the one who watches and what is being watched. The realization is not ecstatic. It is sobering. The pressure intensifies, not toward climax, but toward concentration. Everything extraneous fades. Past and future lose their grip. You are here, fully, without commentary. The silence becomes dense, alive. It does not soothe you. It holds you. You feel the presence of something vast, not external, not internal. It does not guide. It does not judge. It simply is. You recognize it as the ground that has always been there, obscured by noise, by intention, by fear of stillness. Contact with it is not revelation. It is recognition. The furnace dims slightly, not extinguished, but stabilized. The heat remains, quieter now, integrated. You sense that this intensity will not leave you. It will accompany you into ordinary moments, into speech, into action, altering them subtly without announcing itself. There is no triumph here, no sense of having passed a test, only a deepening seriousness, a humility that does not abase but aligns. You feel how much responsibility this contact carries, not as obligation, but as consequence. Once seen, it cannot be unseen. The silence stretches, then gently loosens. The desert returns to awareness. The stars, the ground, your breath. Everything is the same. Everything is altered. The crescendo does not resolve. It stabilizes like a sustained note that fades without ending. You sense the movement turning now, not away from the depths, but back toward life with them intact. The work does not recede. It embeds itself, asking not for explanation, only for continued presence. You do not leave this place. It releases you only in appearance. What is gathered here settles quietly into the background of your awareness, altering how you stand, how you listen, how you move through ordinary hours. Nothing announces itself. No mark distinguishes you from who you were before. And yet the inner weather has changed. You notice it first in small moments, in pauses that once felt unbearable and now simply exist, in reactions that soften before becoming action, in the way silence no longer feels like absence, but like a field in which something watches alongside you. You realize that what you touched was not meant to be held. It was meant to be lived with. The desert remains within you, not as deprivation, but as clarity, a space where illusions thin out quickly, where excess cannot hide. You sense how easily you could abandon it again, how tempting it would be to fill that space with noise, certainty, and tension. The option remains open. It always will. Nothing here binds you by force. The images return occasionally, not in sequence, not on command. A flicker of fire behind the eyes when attention deepens. The echo of water moving when you release control. The feeling of standing before a door you do not need to open. These are not symbols to interpret. They are reminders of relationship. You sense that the dialogue has not ended. It has only changed tempo. What once demanded dramatic dissent now asks for quiet fidelity. To notice when the old voices reclaim authority. To recognize when cleverness mocks simplicity. To stay with what feels unresolved without rushing to improve it. There is no final alignment to maintain. No state to protect. What exists now is a living tension, fragile and resilient at once. It will shift. It will be tested. You will forget it at times. That forgetting is not failure. It is part of the rhythm of return. You move back into life carrying less explanation and more presence. The world does not appear transformed, yet your contact with it has subtly reoriented. Events no longer demand meaning immediately. You allow them to arrive first, to register in the body before the mind intervenes. This changes everything quietly. You understand now that the work does not belong to solitude alone. It breathes through speech, through conflict, through intimacy, through fatigue. The depths do not ask you to withdraw from life. They ask you to meet it without abandoning yourself. When questions arise, you let them stand longer than before. When discomfort surfaces, you resist the urge to anesthetize it with certainty. You remember that waiting is not emptiness, but incubation, that nothing essential blooms under pressure. You sense the presence again, faint but unmistakable. Not above you, not within you, with you. It does not demand belief or obedience. It asks only that you continue listening, even when the voice grows quiet, even when nothing seems to respond. The dialogue continues in silence now, in breath, in attention, in the spaces between reactions. You walk on without conclusion, accompanied by something that does not guide you forward, but keeps you honest where you stand. And that presence remains, unfinished, alive, waiting with you.